You feeling all right?
As if you care.
I must have you on some pretty serious narcotics for you to be up and about after just one day.
Something you know all about, Stella. All right, guys, we are in progress recording today with Stella Taylor on Play It Forward. Stella is a filmmaker, writer, director, and the film we're going to be talking about today is A Little Dark. Stella, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Cassia. I really do appreciate it.
You got it. You said my name perfectly right off the get-go. I mean, you
You
just
know,
didn't waste any time. And I appreciate like you did it with confidence. You heard it and you got it.
Hey,
Um,
it's all that acting process.
right.
If you say it with
Right.
confidence, most people are never
Right.
gonna, tell you that you're wrong. So much
Right.
obliged, good sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Stella, thanks. Can you introduce yourself a little bit, however you'd like as a filmmaker, artist, planetary being, and set up a little dark for us?
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm Stella Taylor. I'm a filmmaker, director, actor, writer. Not necessarily in that order, but definitely filmmaker, director, writer, actor. I like to do it all. I really find everything about filmmaking wonderful. I don't think there's a single role on a film set that I don't enjoy or at least have an appreciation for. But I personally create work that's very emotionally driven, very narrative driven, very drama driven, character rich, especially steeped in, I'd say like some personal truth, but also with a little bit of nuance and some flavor. I personally don't approach film as entertainment or any like big box office type of stuff. I kind of approach it as like a reverence, more of a respect to the craft, and respect to what it is as an art form. It's a way for me as a person to like, map those very deep, personal, human emotions, right? Grief, power, family legacy, legacy in general, and especially longing. I feel like as viewers and filmmakers, we go to the cinema, we watch the lights go down, and we long to be these people. We long to be with them, and I want to represent that as a filmmaker and as a director. So especially through the lens of women in film and autonomy and what it means to be like your own true self and how do you see yourself. So my work kind of lives in that space between, I would say, not necessarily realism, but a lot of memory and realism and where those gaps kind of shift back and forth and how it faces our internal truths, right? So where everything's a little bit kind of strange, but not in the David Lynch type of strange, even though he's one of my favorite directors, but deeply human, very deeply human. I feel like filmmaking and films in general reflect back on to us what we deeply desire as human beings. The opposite of death is desire. So the real question is what do you desire? Well, I desire to share my voice, and decide to share my stories and see if anybody relates to them. So that's kind of how A Little Dark came. And A Little Dark was my directorial debut. It's also my acting debut and my writing debut. So I hit the
Congrats.
triple threat there.
Wow.
Thank you very much. It was a big success for me personally, to get that done and to have a vision, and to see that vision all the way through. So first and foremost, like A Little Dark is a family film. It's not a narrative and a drama. And most of the time, it's really not what it seems underneath. I'm not saying it's, finding the ear in the ground and going in the depths of somebody's soul, but it's more or less about like, what happens when you go away from this place that you called home for so long, and then you come back to it, and nearly nothing has changed, but yet everything in your relationships have changed. So we follow this woman who comes back in with a plan, probably not a very good plan, a rescue plan, if you really want to call it that, and has to confront the patriarch of the family, her father, on something pretty serious, on legacy, on worth, on wealth, and slowly starts to uncover that, oh, things have changed while she was gone, and now I have to rectify, or now she has to rectify how she's going to move forward. And I say like the most important thing about A Little Dark as far as, sovereignty goes is it's about making choices that are extremely hard, especially towards your own family, without losing any part of your sovereign self. So that's my little pitch for A Little Dark as far
Great.
as what it's about.
That's great. I saw the pilot, and as your debut work, I mean, it's, very well done.
Thank you.
It's got a lot of, beautiful elements in it. The cinematography is really nicely done, and the actors are well cast and committed to their performance. And um, the lead role is played by, I you'll fill in who she's played by, but I was
Absolutely.
going to say the character's name is Stella Palmer.
Yes.
So we've got that coincidence between your name and hers. The lead actress is.
Lauren Ann Curtis. Wonderful. And that was actually Lauren's debut
Oh,
film.
cool.
Yeah, it was the first thing that she threw herself into. She literally walked into an acting class. It was the Studio Seattle, which is run by Andrew Tsao. And she walked in, did a monologue, and I knew it. I was like, there she is. I
That's
can I
nice.
can put myself into her. So yes, thank
That's
you very much.
great. Yeah. So that was Kismet. So, you know, to set up a little bit more of the narrative of the pilot, you've got a highly dysfunctional family. You've got some blue collar, not suburban, rural route and kind of landscape visually, but also just the cultural landscape of pretty rural town, small town. And you've got, again, this high dysfunction, mother's dead, father's the patriarch, he controls the wealth that might be inherited. And Stella, the lead actor role, wants to, make sure that that goes to her sister, and she wants to take her sister out of a bad dysfunctional marriage. Her father and her sister's husband are close, and they seem to be aligned, and so there's that power structure there that she's trying to go against. And then as she comes back to town, we see how dysfunctional she is. And the
Yes,
dysfunction of the town never left her, although she left the town. And so the dysfunction of her families continued and intensified. All that dysfunction never went away. And so and she confronts it all and tries to, help her sister, and her sister ultimately loses trust in her. Um, and and then as the plot moves along, we see the layers of dysfunction and how they're interrelated, and how she's inherited the dysfunction, right? I'm not sure if I
very
said that
true.
already, but
Very
so that said, it's this legacy of kind of the sins of our fathers are passed upon, and so forth. And then what do we do with them? And we come to a point in a time in our life's journey where we are adults, we're responsible for ourselves, and we have to take our healing in our own hands. Now, Stella is not at that point yet, although in terms of her chronological maturity, she is, but her mental, emotional maturity is not there yet. And so she, dives right back if she ever leaves to, the roles that she may have played out earlier. So, a little dark is a lot dark, and
much.
maybe it's
It's
a.
actually not the first name for it. We actually the producer Andrew Tsao and I we were thinking about like, oh, it's the big dark, but we wanted to kind of juxtapose that with everything that you said. And thank you for going through a little bit more detail into the film. It's something that it's deep, right? It's not a lighthearted family film. Like you go into the depths, like you said, like we're talking about the sins of the father, we're talking about our past, we're talking about coming back and looking at ourselves in the mirror and being like, who have I become and who do I want to be, right? And how do I confront those sort of deep inner sort of contradictions within oneself with like while also facing this level of, when you're 25, how do you face that type of maturity going forward, when you're becoming an adult, when you're facing your family, when your sister literally says, I don't think you should come around here anymore. How does that change you as a human being and how do you react to it most importantly, right? Like what choices do we make in this world? How do we make these choices and what do we do with those choices is another sort of like element of a little dark that I wanted to go and kind of step ladder down on. And that's absolutely correct as far as like what encompasses the pilot in itself. I wanted to leave people with a lingering sense of, well, what the heck happens? well, what the hell happens to her? Did she put her father in jail? Did the threat work? Did he die? Did Jamie actually, decide to leave her sister? What happens with Eddie? Was there any other collusion going on? And then you have, the additional aspect of it, which is the law enforcement, right? Small towns, they don't have a lot of law enforcement. So what happens when corruption also encompasses in a small town and how it permeates this sort of really dark sense of justice, right? And you ask that question of like, well, what is justice and what are we even doing here out here? And also, like you said, as far as like the world of A Little Dark, it was very contained, but we decided to use a lot of landscape, the horizon. I grew up in the desert. We actually shot A Little Dark in my hometown, which was great. It was wonderful. I got to form better relationships with the people that I grew up with, and they got to finally see like what I decided to do. When you come from a
Hmm.
small rural town and you say, I want to be a film director, they don't look at you funny. They're just like, we don't know what that is, but okay.
Hmm.
So I
Good
wanted to
luck.
also, yeah, good luck. We support you, but we can't really help you as far as like giving you advice or anything like that. So it was also that sort of meta-ness of like being thrown out into the world and then coming back and being like, I'm a changed different person, but I'm still kind of me. I'm just growing up now into my own sort of woman and person and human psyche. So that's kind of what I really wanted to throw in A Little Dark in 42 minutes, if you can believe that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you did. And the question is, in a world where it's unjust, and in a world where you're not necessarily given the tools to succeed, and you grow up with a lot of dysfunction, well, what do you do? And I guess even before we, talk about what do you do, or you, the question of play it forward, the first one is how did your own personal not life inspire the narrative? What themes have you wrestled with? And, those all those themes have got to be personal to you.
Very personal. I mean, I will say up front, I grew up in a very loving family. So that was, a very supportive family, but, the bases and the bones were still there. But I would say like my kind of inspiration or like how it came to be was I mean, honestly, I almost died. And that's not to be morbid, but it's a little dark. And it's not a metaphor. I was sick, I was scared, I was going through a lot of stuff, and I had to persevere. So we actually had to delay production for like over a year. And I didn't know if I was ever going to get to make it. Like truly, Cassia, I did not think that I was ever going to be able to be like Stella Taylor, writer, director, actor on screen and have a vision come through. So a little dark became like my line in the sand. It was either do or die. It was either I'm going to come out of this alive or I don't want to think, I don't want to have to entertain the other thought of what that means. So it wasn't just about making a film, really. It was about becoming a filmmaker and becoming a writer and director and an actor and pursuing that goal and pursuing that, whole entire vision. So I was, when I was going through all of that, I kind of had this thought of like, well, what if my life had turned out differently? What if it was just me, my sister, and my dad, and mom wasn't around? How would I have ended up any differently as Stella? And so that's kind of where the train of thoughts kind of percolated out, where it's like, I had a lovely town, a lovely upbringing. Of course, a small town has its own very quirky attributes and things like that. So I incorporated a lot of that into that world of A Little Dark. So, claiming that identity, claiming that authorship, really owning my creative voice too, and being like, I want to do narrative, I want to do drama. I'm not a comedy person, I'm not a horror person, not yet at least. But it was more or less proving to myself that I could absolutely live through those darkest seasons of my life and still come out the other end with something that I made, with something with my name on it, and claim my ownership of who I was. And so doing this film was more or less like proving to myself, yeah, Stella, you're a writer, director, actor, you can do this. Like there's nothing that, you face death, you can do this. So what's your fear? And that was the other thing. Like fear is a big thing in my life. I've been afraid many years, and it was time to move forward. I was tired of avoiding things. I was tired of, avoiding my life and avoiding my problems and avoiding my issues. So it was either go through this obstacle, the obstacle is the way. You have to go through it. It's the only way through it, and that's the only way to build courage. So it was my big courage signal too, capital C, of like, if you can do a film, a pilot, and do all those things, what else can't you do in the world?
Well, you did it.
Yeah, I did it, and I'm very happy that I did it.
Um, Overcoming a tremendous amount of adversity like that is, certainly builds character and confidence and faith in yourself, if not something greater than yourself. Um, and from the perspective of the narrative, we have, as far as, what I have boiled down the theme to is, um, your narrative is a pilot, so it sets up, an episodic sequence of events that, have who knows how many seasons that'll so run, but it does have like a natural flow and natural sequence to it. And so, as a human being, you're given the set of circumstances, and if it's unfortunate, you can lash out, you blame others, you destroy yourself through different means. In this film, we have, drug abuse, which is heavy. So, an addiction and this running away that you mentioned, and all of that is comes from not wanting to face something that uh, you need to face, or something that's constant source of
Pain and
pain.
suffering. Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
you know, at what point, that what we've seen through A Little Dark in terms of the pilot that you covered is the dysfunction and the abuse, and the, how all those choices lead to more pain and suffering. Um, how have you learned to get out of that loop in your life?
Right. Great question, Kostya, truly. Because I feel like it's a question that all human beings should ask themselves. We all feel pain, right? We all feel suffering. We all feel the spectrum of, the deepest, darkest lows and the highest of the highs. Um, it's just unfortunate the highs don't last as long as the lows tend to do. But I would say like honoring your fear, understanding it, coming to terms with it. Not to go back to the death thing, but like that's most people's biggest fear is not being around anymore, not being able to survive, right? So my big question was when I was going through all of that stuff and I was looking at myself and I was asking myself like, well, who do you want to be? What kind of woman do you want to be? What kind of director do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? And I had these great big visions of myself and of, how I saw myself at 30, 35, 40, and where I was going to be. And I was like, well, you have to move forward then. You can't just wait for life to happen. You can't just have a scary experience and then go and retreat, which is what I've done. I've had those types of experiences. I've avoided, I've come back from them. But it's absolutely changing the mindset of having, I'm so scared to, I want to be courageous. I want to be brave, right? I don't want to be a scared little girl who is, going through a lot of stuff. I want to have this vision of myself. So one would be honoring my fear, recognizing that it's not a bad thing to have fear because everybody has fear, and shame and guilt, low key wrapped in a donut of denial most of the time. And that's the big thing about Stella Palmer is she's in denial about a lot of things. She's in denial about, her family, how it's affected her, how it's cultivated her own attitude. And so that's the other shift that I had as far as overcoming it. It's a shift in attitude, right? There is that moment when Stella is confronted by her sister. She's like, I know who you are. I know why you're doing this, but I cannot have this around in my family anymore. And so Stella has to make that choice. And that choice is you got to confront your biggest fear, which is your father. That's why they have the tussle at the very beginning of the film. It's earned, right? That fight is it's 5 years coming, right? And so go through it, be surprised of what happens on the other side. No, I'm not saying go and do some crazy stuff to overcome a fear, like go and jump off a cliff or anything like that. No. What I'm saying is have a conversation with yourself. And I did. I've had a lot of conversations with myself. There was a lot of times where I was just sitting in a sick bed, all I had was my mind, right? So it's how you choose to talk to yourself and how you choose to think about yourself and how you think about doing and moving forward those actions, right? It starts with a thought, then it starts with an action, and then it ends up with a result. And that comes from my acting background, studying at the Studio Seattle. I feel like I have a way better understanding of acting more as a more understanding as a director because I've done acting. Acting is always in action, right? You're always pursuing something. So I decided to kind of take that mindset and be like, well, if I just act right in my life and put on this persona of Stella Taylor, or who I am, or even, who it is on projection screen of Stella Palmer, it's how I react to things is a lot more important than how I think about things, right? So long story short, it's attitude, it's mindset, it's how you think, and it's how you want to act for yourself. One of my favorite quotes ever is a Stoic quote that's life is like a play. It doesn't matter the length, but the acting that matters. Completely changed my world. I was like, oh, you have to act right. So act right.
Yeah. Um, Thank you, Stella. Hard-won experience is where we find the strength to act from in a way that has integrity. And if we want to be the vision of ourselves, the best vision of ourselves, it sounds like we've got to face the truth of where we are now and where the choices that are going to lead us to that vision of ourselves down the road. And it's wonderful, as an actor and both now a director, cultivating that vision. That long-term vision. It's like all these games that we play in our lives, all these roles, whatever, a director or actor, any of it.
Father, mother, yeah.
Right. It's all uh, practice
Yeah.
for the game of being ourselves, being the best self, and being in our own bodies and minds in a way that can create love for ourselves and for others, even in the face of injustice, even in the face of trauma and pain, and to have the courage and awakening to understand, hey, I can choose that.
Yep.
I can choose that. I don't have to live in the legacy that I've been given. I
Yep.
can choose this for my life, and then do it. Is a very special place, and I honor you for doing that, and I honor you for being that and coming to that place, and what a wonderful testament to the inner journey that you've gone through with this film that you have as an object to reflect back to you your own personal choices that you've made. Um, so, last question is, and I think you've answered so much of it, but I guess I'll lay it on you anyway because you never know what might come out. But how have you been personally changed since making the movie?
Oh, I feel like I can do pretty much anything now. Really. And I would say that it kind of woke me up a little bit. I was 28 or so when I did the film. I'm a little older now. It's been a couple years, and one, it matured me a lot. It matured me quite a bit. But I also learned that like filmmaking or writing, directing, and acting is every emotion all at once, right? Even when in the pre-production to principal photography, all the way to post-production, like you're still fe feeling those fears, you're still feeling those sort of anxieties, you're still feeling the uneasiness of like, well, am I doing it right? Am I making the right cut? Did I make that beat shift in that scene? Did I give to my scene partner? Did I write a decent enough script that anybody wants to read it? And luckily enough, Jeff Blake was, a very SAG time winning actor. He picked it up and was like, yes, it's good, it's great, I want to do this. But it also, like to me, like as a director, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to challenge myself and like learn was directing. I've written, I've acted, but I really wanted to try directing. So like to me that whole thing of like learning what directing means, seeing everything, holding everything, like and never losing like, the soul of the story or the play or whatever it is you want to, represent it as. But most importantly, I learned how to fight for a vision. I learned how to fight for a vision to be like, no, it's not right. We got to get it right. And I know I'm not being a rude person. And I learned how to hold a scene. Most importantly, I had amazing scene partners. Lauren Ann Curtis was brilliant. I love the bar scene so much. I absolutely adore it. I learned how to work with real actors, like they challenged me. My gosh, I thought I was going to be the weakest link on the scene, or in the story, not having any film acting experience whatsoever. Working with designers and editors and like, but most importantly, I would say like very much in line with the film. And if you'll allow me to indulge a little bit, I very much learned how to like lead without losing a part of myself. And that was very, meta with the film. Like, how do you lead your life? The life you lead determines how you, are seen in the world. But I would say more importantly is like I learned how to have a really good attitude with leading towards my life, right? Like, I agree that a person's attitude determines the way that their life will lead. I will stand by that until the day that I die.
For sure.
But more than anything, I learned that I could do it. Like I proved to myself, I'm like, at the premiere a year and a half later, I was like, I got to see the fruition of my results, right? Of all of the things encompassed and share that, right? And that's the other sort of heartwarming thing about it was I was able to share it with my family, the town of Odessa,
It's
you
awesome.
know, my producers and things like that. So yeah, I learned that I could survive as well, and also survive like what almost took me out, and then also take something real from it, right? So I get to hold a little dark forever, and put it up on my wall here and remember it for the rest of eternity. And it will live forever in eternity because like that's the whole thing is like now a little dark will never be forgotten, like this family will never be forgotten. This town will never be forgotten. So people can return to it, see it, face their own fears, and be like, well, if she can do it, well, why can't I?
Beautiful, Stella. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I one of the things I heard in that is choosing to be happy,
Yep.
making the choice to be happy and what that looks like and just doing it. And
Yeah. Hitting the
yeah,
ground running and keep digging.
yeah,
That's the other thing is it taught me to keep digging. There are moments where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I was like, no, that's just a bad attitude. You do want to do this. You're just running away in fear. You're avoiding it again. I'm like, okay, I do want to do this. I do want this. So, you know, take what is mine and go and run with it.
beautiful. Stella Taylor, writer, director. The film is a little dark, and thank you so much for being on the show. A powerful voice, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Kostya. It was a pleasure. Of course, I wish it would have, not lasted a little longer. I could have talked about this forever.
We'll have to
Uh,
do it again.
Absolutely. Please reach out anytime. But thank you for having me. Wonderful questions. Wonderful
Thanks.
host, too.
Thank
You're
you. Thank you.
brilliant.
Thank
I felt
you.
very
You're
comfortable.
sweet.
So
I did my job. Good.
you did your job.
All right, Stella. Everybody, peace on Play It Forward. Till next time. Be here now. Bye.
Bye.